Sounds good.
Hi, patrons.
What's up, y'all?
We're gonna keep talking about Uber.
Yeah, we were gonna talk about it on Sunday, but I was stuck in fucking Denver.
Yeah, for like 48 hours. A ridiculous amount of
Dude.
time.
Yeah. What a mess that was. Is it currently is. The first day that I got my flight canceled, 600 flights across the US were canceled at that time.
Jesus fuck. Okay.
Uh-huh.
That's ridiculous.
Apparently Pete Buttigieg is pissed. He's like, "No. You're gonna pay for all this shit, Delta." Like he's like stood up and like really kind of pushed for them to reimburse everybody everything.
Good. He's not wrong.
Yeah.
We both did holidays apparently. Again,
Oh, did
using
you have some
different ones.
too?
Yeah. We
Oh,
so there's some alignment though, so I'm just gonna skip the ones that are overlap with yours.
okay. That's good. That's good for me.
Okay. Um, Sweet. So yeah, I think we're just gonna pick up off on the where we're at. You're at the evidence. Gig directly
Yeah.
caveats. We know about behavior. Oh. There's a really important thing I wanted to add to um the discussion about what we know about behavior. I'm just gonna write token economies and leave it at that.
Yay! I love token economies.
I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. So,
Yeah,
um,
non-contingent token economy.
what did I watch recently? I watched Wish. I
I heard
watched.
that was
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Okay is about the way to describe it. I really feel like that was a missed opportunity. I don't know what went wrong, but it was just like, I don't know. It just did not seem like it was at the caliber of writing I generally see from Disney.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah.
I just watched Deadpool 2 because because Deadpool and Wolverine's coming out.
Oh,
So,
see, that's so bad.
oh dude, I've been dying at the marketing that's been coming out. Like, did you see the Xbox controllers?
No.
They have a pair of Xbox controllers, and the back of it is their butts.
That's what I was gonna guess it was. Oh my God.
Dude, it's been so great. And watching Deadpool 2, I was like, this is why this is gonna be so great because it's so over the top and ridiculous. Like the first scene, I watched it with my son because I was like, we're gonna go see this. Like we're gonna go see Deadpool and Wolverine, and it's gonna be absurd. But like I think he's old enough now. He's going into middle school. He's old enough now to see some of this stuff, and he won't get
Okay.
the jokes that are gonna be more like, ugh,
Yeah.
which was fine. And so he started watching it, and the first scene, he's in Deadpool 2, he's like in a bar and he's like cutting people's hands and heads off, and he's like, "Oh my God, this is wild." And I was like, "Yeah, dude, like this is welcome to Deadpool." Like we didn't watch the first one because there's the whole scene where like they're having sex across like every holiday. And I was like, that's
Oh,
probably a little bit much for him. Um, so we'll
bummer.
just go with the one with just like all the profanity and all the ridiculous nonsense. So it was pretty great
That's fair.
though. So funny.
Yeah. Okay.
You're talking
I
about
am
Ubi?
talking about
Ubi
Ubi.
Dooby Doo?
My levels are so good. They're
Yeah,
so
mine are
tight.
also so fucking tight.
This is why, by the way, I always put a language warning on the uncut versions of the episodes and the videos.
Yeah.
I say
Uh-huh.
warning, language may be unsuitable for sensitive audiences.
I like that. It's
Yeah.
like there's this band Drain that plays right now, and their backdrop just says disclaimer, we're not responsible for what you do in the next 30 minutes because people like go really crazy for their sets. So they put up this big disclaimer, like this big thing behind them. And their sets are fucking bonkers. It's great.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
Ready?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I'll count us down and just make sure things are going correctly. They are. Okay, good. Three, two, one, go. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do. I am your guaranteed to be here host, Abraham.
And I'm your monthly paycheck host, Shane.
Ooh, we're a psychology podcast. We talk about the things that people do and why they do them, and sometimes policies that affect the thoughts and opinions and behaviors of other people. And this is, by the way, part two of a discussion that we're having.
Yes, and what better policy to impact people and their behavior than just giving them money?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think most people are going to balk at that. I mean, a lot of people will, but most people maybe won't.
Yeah,
But
they'll
yeah,
do it for the
that's
wrong reasons.
that's right. Wrong for the wrong reasons. That's what it is.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We appreciate having you here. You might learn a lot from going back and checking out the first episode if this is the first one you're ever hearing. I mean, we're certainly happy to have you, and maybe this is all you need. I don't know. You do you. But we did cover a lot of ground. As a matter of fact, I'll do a quick recap on what we covered last time. So we basically introduced this idea of universal basic income. This was a major staple in the candidacy of one. Andrew Yang during, I think, the 2016 elections, where he was sort of pitching this idea of $1,000 a month to all people. And so we kind of wanted to talk about the history of this policy, how it would work, what it is intended to do, what it could do, and a little bit the sort of objections and rebuttals to those objections from people on both sides of this issue. And mostly we're kind of just curious, I don't know, what would this do, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's really fun about politics and policies is that a lot of times some really cool or novel idea will come up in a system that it's never been tried in, and people will go, "Huh, I wonder how that'll work," or they'll go, "No, that sounds like a bad idea, and I'll never do that." And so we're kind of exploring like, well, what could or what would or what should happen in the event that a UBI does exist for folks.
Yeah. Is it a bad idea? We don't know. We're going to try and find that out today because today we are unpacking the evidence, which is to say the studies, the research, the applications of the idea of a universal basic income and some places where it has in fact been tried. But before we jump into that, I do want to say thank you for joining us on this day, whether you're new or not. We wish to wish you a happy National Avocado Day.
Ah, yes, and it is also Cotton Candy Day, the worst of the candies.
It is also National Raspberry Cake Day.
I'm into that. It
Sure.
is Jump for Jelly Beans Day.
Okay. It is National Mutt Day. We love our mutts.
Oh, we love our mutts. It's Shredded Wheat Day.
Okay. It is Black Tot Day. Now, do you know what this is, Shane? I had to look this up.
No idea.
Okay, apparently this it comes from British rum rations for I want to
Of
say the
course.
Navy or something like that, and so it was it's some tradition around rum rations, but that is a Black Tot Day.
I knew that like a tot was what, like a small portion or a sip of like some alcohol. Like you give somebody a small tot, and it's like, I think that's like where hot toddy comes from.
I think maybe at some point we'll have to talk about British rhyming slang or some of their other idioms because much like I imagine American slang and idioms must sound to the rest of the world, British idioms and slang I find tremendously confusing.
Nah, we don't need to talk about those lobster backs. No thanks.
Okay.
USA, USA. No, actually, that'd be really fascinating. I know there's probably some really cool history there.
Yeah.
There's some very cool history in England, I'm sure. It's World Ranger Day.
It is Uncommon Instrument Awareness Week.
Don't play them. Just be aware that a theremin is out there.
That's
And
right.
you should be worried because it makes the sound of worry.
That it is kind of the sound of worry. I agree.
Yeah, it's National Marine Week, which I love.
Absolutely. It is Beans Month. So appreciate those beans.
Yeah, Boston stoked. And it's also Anti-Boredom Month.
Very good. All right. But as I promised, we were going to talk about this universal basic income thing, and I will get to that in one moment. I would first like to tell you that if you haven't already, you may support this podcast. You can do that by going over to Patreon, picking up some merch, leaving us a rating and review, liking, subscribing, sharing us with a friend, and doing all those kind of cool, awesome, rewarding things that just make everyone feel oh so good. And if you
Yay.
don't do that, we're still happy to have you here. Thank you for listening. So let's go ahead and dig into our topic here. Unless there's anything I'm forgetting to billboard up front.
No, I think we could dive into it.
Okay, great. So this is part two, talking about universal basic income. And so the first thing, really the crux of what we're talking about in this discussion to wrap up our overall series, I don't know, two-parter here on the idea of universal basic income is we want to unpack the evidence here. And there have now have actually been there have now actually been several experimental attempts to determine how well some program like universal basic income would be, and that they've tried in Canada, Switzerland, Finland, the Netherlands, Germany, Kenya, and in several places around the United States.
Yeah, and there have been several well-designed studies, which is important because there are a lot of studies out there that are not well designed. But
Exactly.
there were some well-designed studies that had very, very positive outcomes. And here are some of the examples that we're talking about of these applications of UBI in society.
Okay, so one of the first ones we're going to unpack here occurred in Stockton, California. It probably had some name, but I didn't bother turning that up in my review of this. But this was early on. This is sort of during the pandemic era, early into lockdown of 2020. And so Mayor Michael Tubbs of Stockton, California, created a program. Oh, this did have a name. I wrote it down, and I just forgot that I did. It was called Mayors for Guaranteed Income, which, Magi. Very catchy.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that a lot.
So in this program, Stockton, along with about 30 other cities, were they had received some part of this $1 million gift from Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey to fund specifically some UBI pilot projects. They wanted to sort of experiment and see how it worked. And so Jack Dorsey was like, I need to atone for my Twitter sins and put money out in the world to make it a better place.
Uh-huh.
And as part of that gesture, mayors such as Michael Tubbs applied for and received money to pilot this UBI program.
Yeah, and the program specifically targeted but randomly selected low income people and ex cons, which is actually really fascinating. And so, specifically, ex cons have trouble finding work and are often often have to return to their same friend groups and same activities that landed them in jail in the first place. And the idea of a UBI in this situation allowed them to get skill training and jobs, so there were lower rates of recidivism.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard for ex-cons to find work. Um, have whatever opinion about that as you want. They are people who will probably need money at some point, and if they don't have a strategy for getting that the legal way, they may go the illegal way. So this was sort
Mm-hmm.
of like, let's try and avoid that happening again. And also early on during lockdown, it was increasingly difficult for anybody to work, let alone people who were already going to be like back of the line in terms
Right.
of how they were prioritized by businesses who are hiring people and looking at that going, I don't know. So,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation, I think. But another thing that happened is that the one of the outcomes of this program, the guaranteed income program, is that it allowed women in abusive households to escape and find their own housing. There was specific accounts, some women sharing their story, how they had essentially been beholden to somebody who was providing income, either all or some of the income, a necessary part of the income, that were very abusive, that these were toxic, problematic relationships. And they were, because they could then rely on income for themselves, they were able to get out of that situation and move into a place where they could at least supplement their cost of living from this program. And it also allowed some people who were already employed, but maybe were making very low wages, to instead sort of look for higher paying jobs because they could afford to not necessarily spend all their time working at a job that paid low wages. And so a lot of people found better paying, higher paying full-time employment because of the cushion that they got from this support, which again overall meant that their economic contributions overall were greater. They were just more going out, more coming in all around, which helps with the overall strength of the economy. And of course, it does force those businesses who are losing low wage workers to have to pay a higher wage that they were very unhappy about doing, but nevertheless were sort of forced to do in many instances.
Right. I mean, it's already fascinating that like in this small kind of pilot program, you're already seeing these like pretty major effects from even it's not even everybody. It's a small
Right.
group of people that are accessing it at random, and just the net positive that has come out of it is really fascinating already. So
Sure.
um
Yeah.
now there is Denver's Basic Income Project, which started in the fall of 2022. So I think it's really important to kind of point out that like a lot of the evidence that we know about now is fairly new, which is
Yeah. Like
cool.
within the last 5 years or
Um,
so. I mean,
yeah,
some of it's there. One project we'll talk about has been going on for like 12-ish years.
yeah,
But yeah, it's there. It is pretty new for the most part. Although we talked about the history a little bit last time.
yeah. So starting in the fall of 2022, 807 participants experiencing homelessness for 1 year were brought into this project, and they were given a universal basic income.
Yeah, and the way they wanted to do this experimentally. So they essentially took these 807 people and put them into three groups, and they were randomly assigned. So there was no reason to believe that any one group should be doing better than another, because they tried to randomly distribute everyone across the groups as much as possible. Now, in the different groups, you had Group A, and they received a flat $1,000 a month in cash, no strings attached. So that comes to, if you can do the math with me, $12,000 per year. Okay.
What?
So, so it's every single month guaranteed you're getting $1,000. That's Group A. Group
Yeah,
B received a large sum up front instead. They got it like a $6,500 payment right away, and then $500 a month for the rest of the year. And if you do the math on that, that also comes out to exactly $12,000. So either way you slice
sure.
it, Group A or Group B, they're both getting $12,000 by the end of the year. One of them got it in the form of $1,000 a month, one of them in a big lump sum, and then a smaller $500 per month. What do you think you would choose, Shane?
Knowing me, I'd probably take the $1,000 a month. Because I think if you gave me $6,500 right away, I'd probably buy a bunch of records.
Fair enough.
Yeah. What about you? Which one would you pick?
I think I'd also go for the 1,000, and mostly because I would like to plan for down the road to just like constantly have that as part of my regular budget. Um, and I think if I had the big lump sum, I'd probably throw it all at a bunch of bills and debt really quickly, which is not a bad thing, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't spread it around very much. And I feel like the spreading it around is ultimately very useful.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
I
Now,
went
Group C. Yeah, no worries. That's I just saw the new bullet point. Ooh, so cute.
ahead.
Uh, beep. Now, Group C was the control group who only received $50 a month for the year, which equates to again math. But that ended up costing $600, which is 5% of the other groups.
Yeah. So they only received 5% of what the other groups received, trying to rule out that like, they were still receiving something, but it was how much and what that meant, because they wanted to sort of see what were the effects here. Okay. So, various metrics they wanted to look at, including things like housing, employment, and a lot of other things that might come with people who are experiencing homelessness. And to start with, 6% of Group A and Group B, and then 12% of Group C were in some sort of house or apartment or hotel at the beginning of the study. 6% of Group A and Group B, 12%
Yeah,
of Group C. So that doesn't mean that they necessarily lived there, or maybe it was temporary, or they had intermittent access to these places, whatever, 6 and 12%. After a year, after this experiment, 44% of Group A, 48% of Group B, and 43% of Group C were all in a house or apartment. So essentially went from a negligible small percentage it's not nothing, but up to that they had nearly half of all groups were then no longer unhoused by the end of the year.
I mean, that's a pretty significant jump when you talk about going from 6% to 44%. I mean, that's a lot of people moving into a
Yeah,
home.
I mean, that is a meaningfully large jump. Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking about percentages, and the one thing that keeps coming to mind is that 100% of this podcast does end up with an ad at some point in time.
Nice.
Thanks.
Okay, so the universal basic ad come. Um,
Ah, hate the outcome.
yeah. All right, so we've talking about these groups who were in the study in Denver in their project. Now, as we mentioned, that there was an increase in housing. Now, one I think caveat, one or not caveat, but one argument that was made by people who were sort of against the idea of just a cash, no strings attached, here you go, was that these would be people who are dependent on the government. These are people who like they don't know what to do with the money. They should be told what to do with the money. That was, and like they should get sort of vouchers for specific services that those politicians probably have some stake in anyway.
Right.
But anyway, so they sort of say they're not going to work because they're now getting this money. Okay, both Group A and Group B significantly increased their full-time employment by the end of the year, whereas Group C did actually decline slightly, the ones who were not receiving very much. They
Huh.
only got $50 a month. So the groups that were receiving larger amounts, either up front or continuously, had a significant increase in full-time employment. Now, what was I going to say about this? I don't know. Now this is actually important because we talked about, I think in the last episode, or maybe I was planning to talk about it in this one. I don't know, but is the fact that, fuck, I lost it again. I had it and I lost it.
You're so close.
I know. It's like right there. Hold on, give me a second. Okay. What we talked about in the last episode was the fact that like you have to have an address to have a job, and you have to have a job to have an address. So it actually makes a lot of sense. Like $1,000 a month sounds great to those of us who are already making an income every month. To someone who's not
Right.
making an income, that is a wild game changer, but it's not very much money. Like $1,000 a month is awesome, and it's still barely enough to cover rent for a lot of people. And I imagine
Right.
in a city like Denver that does not go very far. So all it really did was give them the support they needed so that they could take care of themselves to like get a job and do that sort of thing. So I think that's a really important probable factor to consider in why that would be the case in this situation.
Right. Now, even more so, like when we talk about kind of the net positives that come out of this, all three groups showed a statistically significant decrease in time spent accessing other services. And there was a decrease in jail time, and there were fewer and visits and less time spent at the ER. So on top of folks getting housing, on top of folks getting more employment, they were using less resources in the community and freeing up resources because they were using them less for other people who might have needed them.
Right, including things like where police were allocating their time to in situations, people were probably doing very little to warrant that amount of attention, and nevertheless were receiving a lot of it and ending up in jail. And with this program, that was just not how that those resources were being spent, was on dealing with that situation. And as you said, that also meant fewer trips to the ER, which that they couldn't pay for. And obviously,
Right.
doctors are obligated to help anyway. So um, I think a really important consideration there. And then, as to be expected, and we'll talk about this in other scenarios as well, all participants reported decreased stress, reported decreased stress and just overall improved mental health and quality of life. In many instances, people report that they use the money to secure vehicles, to secure housing, to pay their debts and their bills, all kinds of things, to feed themselves, to get medicine that they needed, all kinds of things that we sort of take for granted as a basic part of our operating day to day when we're not in a situation where we're unhoused and can't have a job because we don't have an address. So that was also a really big effect.
Right. Real quick, this says 24,000. Was it supposed to be 240,000? This cost a little over 240,000 or 24,000?
I think it was
It's
24 because
24K.
it was 12,000 per group and then 600 for the other group, so it was 24,600, right?
24,600 for Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. All right.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's right.
beep. So this program cost a little over $24,000, but saved the city over $500,000. I mean, that's a huge savings when you think about it. Politicians
Yeah.
often consider a $3 to $1 return on investment a smashing success. And in Denver, it was a return on investment of $49 for every dollar spent. I mean, this is you can't argue against the benefit of just the small program.
Yeah, this is basically 6 times better than their wildest dreams, in terms
Yeah.
of how effective of a return on investment it was and how much it saved. Okay. One of the biggest, most well known, and most well funded programs that has experimented with this is called Give Directly. As a matter of fact, anybody who has heard about this topic has maybe heard of Give Directly the most
Sure.
because this is, I think, the highest profile one, and one of the reasons I saved it for one of the last examples we'll talk about. So, this is a
Yeah.
charity, it's a nonprofit charity funded by economists. They wanted to try this out. And again, it delivers straight, unconditional, no strings attached cash infusions to the poorest people. This is a massive charity donation. It started in Kenya. This is all sort of took place in Africa here. It started in Kenya, but has since expanded to Uganda, Malawi, Rwanda, Liberia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Morocco. So it's now been implemented in many other places over many iterations as they sort of continue to alter, expand, and tweak the program by noting their successes and failures as it rolled out.
Right. So at the time of this episode, they have given over $10 million to over 20,000 people, simply asking the question, are things better, worse, or the same?
And I think they had some optimism around what would be the outcome here, but even still, the results were kind of startling to them, right? Not only did this cash infusion help the families that received it, but the infusions actually helped the entire surrounding community around those people. And people would spend those money that the money that they got on nearby businesses that, of course, improved the overall economy. And there was no inflation that occurred. Hunger plummeted, investments in social and private enterprises expanded, the GDP multiplied, and people were significantly happier, less stressed, and reported an overall higher quality of life.
Yeah, and I think it's really important because I think that listening to this, you might hear the way Abraham just described that and think that that was an exaggerated approach to that. No, this is not. These are not exaggerated numbers. These are not
Yeah.
exaggerated outcomes. This is really what's happening with this stuff, which is like pretty pretty incredible. Like it's almost unbelievable. I mean, like even going further, there is a significant decrease in domestic abuse, and women were able to have a say in how money was spent, or else make it on their own and support their children, which was a big deal. And when the money was equally distributed based on lowest income rather than random assignment, things improved even more. I mean, this is just like net benefit for everybody involved.
Yeah. Not only did the families that received the money experience improvements, but their wealthier neighbors also somehow saw financial improvements, and literally everybody seemed to experience this overall psychological benefits that come with, I guess, a guaranteed level of support and adequate assistance.
Right. And so although economists did not expect inflation on traded goods, they did expect inflation on services or for services increased wages, but that didn't happen either. So it only rose by 0.1%, which is entirely manageable and prices stayed homogenous. So overall, again, it just was great for every single person. Everybody benefited, everybody made money, inflation didn't happen, everybody was
Yeah.
happier. Like, why would we not want to do this?
It was like a quadruple win. Everybody wins.
Yeah, everybody
And
wins.
And this just utterly transformed the Kenyan economy into a far more vibrant and successful overall economy and government. Like everything improved. And there were some other things that they tinkered around with. As I said, they had sort of they had iterated the process as they went, because initially it was random assignment. That was good, but it had the issue that some of the people who were the worst off were not receiving assistance, and they were then actually much less happy by seeing, like, why is nothing good happening to me and is
Sure.
happening to my person right next door to me, who now all of a sudden has a real roof and can feed their family. And there was some amount of like jealousy and I guess a lack of feeling like there was good cooperation going on. And so then instead what they did is they just said, okay, well, let's just do equal distribution among everybody, even if it's a little bit less. And that improved everything. All the jealousy stuff, it all went away. Another thing
Yeah.
that they tinkered with is the idea of like a large lump sum or a bunch of smaller payments, just like with the Denver experiment. They wanted to know what would be the case. What tended to happen, and they saw this with the Denver experiment too, what tended to happen is that if they got a large lump sum, they tended to invest that in something important right away. So, like, one example that I saw was a guy who essentially he'd been doing like really difficult labor where he had to like carry something walking like a very long distance and was just doing this back and forth. And with the money that he got, he bought himself this like pretty inexpensive but really efficient and effective little vehicle. And he was able to start doing driving services that were a lot less taxing on him physically, and he could make more money doing it. And so like a lot of people use that big sum to invest in. If they had a business, they'd invest it in their business. If they didn't have a business, they started one. Like there was an enormous boom in entrepreneurs starting small businesses with this cash infusion that they received, which again meant that they were hiring people. There were people shopping there. Their overall GDP just exploded because there was so much more trade going on back and forth across the thing. And so people who received the smaller amounts, they tended to not necessarily make big expenditures. They would just invest in things constantly, make sure their bills were paid, they had medicine, they might put a little away for savings. But a couple of interesting things sprung up. One is that if they knew they were getting small amounts long term, they would actually specifically save it up for something big, and then they would make a big investment in something like a business. So that still happened if it was long enough out. And the other thing that was
Interesting.
kind of interesting that they did is that many of the communities decided to start pooling theirs together for a rolling lottery, where essentially they'd say, we're not going to take the money we're giving, we're going to put it into a big pot, and then someone's going to draw it, and then someone else will draw it next time. And you don't know who it's going to be, but it'll always be someone different. And then that way, what happened is that someone would get a really big payout. And again, they'd use that to invest in some big project, like starting a business, like buying a car, whatever, where it was an investment. It was an investment opportunity. So essentially, what they landed on, what in their big discovery was, how are people going to spend a no strings attached cash infusion that they receive? The way most smart people would spend that kind of money, right? They
Yeah.
needed it and they used it to improve their lives and improve their situation. And they specifically planned for the long term. Like that was a thing that they did. So I think so far, I think they generally consider this a pretty wild success.
Yeah, and I mean, based on everything that we're seeing here, as far as I can tell, there wasn't anybody that just spent a whole bunch of money on Coke benders when they got these.
Yeah, no, it seems like even the ones where it seemed a little frivolous, like there was one where a lot of people in these African cities, villages, whatever, that received the money, they didn't even have like their roofs were thatched, and so they were difficult to repair. They often could be expensive to repair, although not as expensive as getting a new roof. And so, and they were obviously leaky and had all kinds of issues. And so, a lot of people, one of the things that they do early on is get a better roof. Well, some people didn't, and they followed up. And in a story I was listening to on one podcast that covered this, they followed up with one guy who essentially he had spent his on. So he had kids. His wife, I think, had passed away, and he actually spent his on a dowry because of the system that was in place there, so that he could get married, so that he'd have someone else that would allow him to then get work. And so it was like still an investment. It was an investment in a roof, but it was still an investment in his future and his family's
Yeah.
future. So yeah, I think yeah, people were not just going out and buying a bunch of like, and even if they had, like, even if some people did do that, the majority of people didn't. Like, the net
Right.
effect was everybody benefited, and maybe some people squandered it, but most people didn't. It like went really well across the board in general, and the general part is the important part.
Right. I mean, do you think that anybody that received this like maybe invested in like broadcasting or ads or anything?
Hopefully not. Okay, we're back from that Kenyan sponsored ad break. Uh, maybe they did. I don't know.
Camille?
Good,
Oh,
good for them if they did, I guess.
yeah.
Thanks for playing ads in the middle of our
Appreciate it. Yeah.
podcast. We gave you space for it and it happened. So there it is.
So,
All
just like
right.
with any good project, any good idea, any good study, there are always caveats because the thing about science is, and as Paul Offit says, is that you can't go out and just make a blanket absolute claim because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, there's always going to be some caveat or some asterisk next to the fact that you share, right? Because it's not true for every circumstance every single time. So, what are some of the caveats with UBI as we're talking about this?
Well, one of the, and I think it's, we have sounded like just big time cheerleaders for the UBI program as we've been talking through it. And I think part of that is
Sure.
just the data are extremely compelling. Like, it's in line with what our values would be. It supports the hypothesis that we might have, and the data have just been overwhelmingly positive in the places where it's been applied. But I also think that we do need to be good skeptics and good scientists and say, yeah, but, and one big yeah, but is that universal basic income has the word universal in it. And that implies that all of the people in a population receive the money, not some of them, all of them. And in the
Right.
examples that we have been demonstrating, UBI was distributed, or guaranteed income is probably a better way to put it, was distributed only in limited populations of people who were really the most needy in those populations. And although these were very successful, perhaps that does suggest that the best application of the hypothesis, the policy here, is only for people who need it the most, rather than it being actually universal. We don't know what would happen if we did it to an entire population. We haven't done that yet.
Right. And that's kind of the biggest caveat with all of this. It's like we really just don't know. Never has this been comprehensively attempted in a closed system, such as an entire country or an entire state. We don't know how much it would actually cost, probably more than we think. We don't know exactly how we pay for it. We don't know if it would drive up inflation. We don't know if it would encourage employment. We don't know how it would affect wages. We just don't know if it would work as designed. We have examples of variations, but we don't know as like a UBI for every single person what that would do to any society at large.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things that I found, they suggested there is basically no way that you would not get massive inflation with this program. Maybe. I mean, we have no idea. We have not tried
Right.
this experiment. There was a sort of version of this experiment that was done in the United States. And many of you who have been around for a minute and remember this thing, there was this thing called COVID. And
Uh-huh.
early in the COVID pandemic, when we were all in lockdown and a ton of people were unable to work, the government under an administration that is not the current administration as we speak, um, although
Uh-huh.
it did transfer to the subsequent administration, the government cut a whole bunch of stimulus checks to the American people. Most people received this, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure this was pretty universally distributed. As long as people had like filed taxes, I think was essentially the caveat. Then you got this.
Yeah.
And of course, during COVID, most people couldn't work or had reduced hours. Insurance dried up, unemployment dried up, rent forgiveness dried up, and the government just cut people checks just because. Some households were getting well over $1,000 just to have. Like that was just money that they had now. Did this contribute to the massive inflation we saw immediately following the sort of ending of the pandemic, I guess, the last couple of years? Um, Maybe, possibly, we don't know, right?
Yeah.
For some people, this was a lifeline that they badly needed. This was the thing that made them get through the pandemic. Some people bought new Xboxes.
Sure.
It does seem it seems to have helped prevent the economy from just grinding to a complete halt. So probably that worked in that way. But again, we don't know. That was like a version of this experiment that's been tried on a larger scale, and it was expensive.
Yes, and we really don't know. We don't really know what the cause effect relationship is, right? Like that's
Yeah,
kind of the problem with, and I think that's kind of
right.
always the problem with economics. It's like we really don't know what the cause effect is on such a large
Yeah,
scale. Like there's too many
so many
variables to control
variables.
for.
Yeah,
Now, based on the available evidence, though, what we have seen, it seems like only implementing this program with people who need it the most would probably have the intended effect that we're talking about. That is, people who are at extreme levels of poverty and who are experiencing homelessness. So, right now, a guaranteed income is so effective with those populations that not only would it likely eliminate our country's homelessness program or problem, it might actually save more money than it costs by reducing instances of jail time, ER visits, and the need for mental health services that might not be necessary for folks if they have their basic needs met.
yeah. Like the investment would be worth the cost from the amount of money that would be saved in the other programs that are being used to essentially mitigate the worst effects of an unimproved upon situation for so many people, right?
Right,
So
right.
it does seem like at least a version of this, one that is targeted, the evidence seemed to suggest that will probably work in the way that we want it to. As far as universal, we just don't know. But for targeted implementation, it would probably get the job done.
Right.
Now, it does bring us to a conversation. We are behavior scientists, we think, and we
Sure.
like to try to apply what we know about how behavior works to understand how policies will affect those behaviors. Again, putting on our big old skeptical hats of fun, so that we can start to unpack these in a very, I think, I guess I want to say sort of science minded approach, which I guess is just the skeptical approach. But so let's talk through really quick what we do already know about behavior and how we think this would affect behavior.
Right. So I guess if like maybe a place to start is work, right? So if work was entirely optional, all people, likely would do very little of it unless the work itself was rewarding. But I'm sorry, I said anything. I meant everything has a cost, and work is not optional. So whether people would stop working in a UBI system depends on how much a UBI would tip the scales away from employment. Meaning, the more money that is given, the less likely people are going to need to work. But if it's too little money, like if we don't give enough money, then it's insufficient to make any meaningful changes. So there's like this kind of like balance of if I give too much, the folks won't work. If I give too little, it won't do anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, it all has to do with balancing the cost with the money that's sort of awarded or given. So a minimum, let's take the minimum wage, for example, that is currently out there. You might like see the minimum wage and think, oh, what they did is they looked at the cost of living and they calculated how much you would need to make to support yourselves in the current economy. No, that is not
No.
It is not some scientifically verified number that guarantees that people will make enough money to live independently. It's just a number. It is just a random number that some politicians were able to get passed as law. Now, it was like somewhat informed. They obviously have people who go out and do some sort of research and survey to try and give some basic numbers to help. But it is at the end of the day, when you really boil everything down, it's just a number that they arrived at and enough people agree to. So
Right.
some people working full time earning minimum wage, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're one of those people who works full time earning minimum wage, you already know that you maybe still can't afford to pay rent from that one job. Like you have to supplement some way or another, right? And many people will
Right.
they'll get roommates and whatnot so that they can afford rent because minimum wage won't cut it. And not only that, but they also have to pay utilities and transportation and other medical costs and things that come up as and like get groceries and everything. So it the expenses are high, to say the least.
Right.
Right now, the cost is such that a UBI system that simply helps close the gap between what someone can make from employment and the cost of living would go a very long way to preventing those people from ending up unhoused on the streets, doing other things that are maybe on the less legal side of things to try and pay their bills and get their needs met. And so that I think is an important consideration. And the first thing that you mentioned, we're talking about where incentives lie and whether we're incentivizing away from work. And another is, are we incentivizing essentially toward meaningful engagement with the systems that we want to have people engaged in, or are we incentivizing doing shady stuff that is maybe lucrative but is also kind of illegal?
Right. Now, trying to dictate how, when, and to what extent, uh, uh, and to what extent people receive assistance.
Received.
Okay. Um, okay, I see. Beep. So trying to dictate how, when, and to what extent received assistance ignores individual circumstances for each person, or can even make things worse. I mean, we have to kind of unpack this a little bit, right? It is better to let people spend money in the ways that they feel they need support to support themselves rather than having or setting up an authority figure to try to decide what should and shouldn't be used or like bought, right? So like that's kind of why like certain programs that limit what people can purchase end up being used as currency anyway. I've seen that plenty of times. Like you see that all the time when somebody will take like they'll sell food stamps because they can only buy certain things with food stamps. So they will sell that because it's like I'd rather have the cash to spend it on things that I need.
Exactly. That is a good example of like a lot of the people who have essentially argued against the idea of just straight cash has basically said like we don't know what they're going to spend it on. Instead, we should give them vouchers for things that we think they should spend it on. And I'm like, you
Right.
don't know what they need. Like that might be perfect for some people, but it won't work for everybody. Cash is universal. They can use it however they're
Right.
going to use it. I'll tell a quick story here, which is well, first I'm going to reference if you remember the movie Liar Liar with Jim Carrey. I assume
Very
you've seen
recent
that.
movie.
Uh, yeah, very timely reference this is.
Yes, of course.
Anyway,
Spoiler alert.
so basic premise, he's not able to lie anymore. So he gets confronted by a homeless person or an unhoused person, or at least someone who's asking for money on the street who looks to be unhoused. And they said, like, can you spare some change? And he says, yes. But he had been previously lying to this person. He said, will you? And he says, no. And he said, why not? And so he says, Jim Carrey's character, who's telling the truth, says, I believe you'll buy booze with it. And and I've heard other people like sort of say like they'll go out and buy things for people that they see who are out on the street asking for money and whatnot. And I sort of have been of the opinion, I'm like, they're like, well, I don't want them to go out and buy alcohol. I'm like, I think that's not really your business, you know. Um, and
Sure.
my philosophy has been like I typically have just carried a whole bunch of ones in my car just in case, just so that I have some on hand if I see someone who's asking for money, and I'll give them a few bucks, and I'm like, they'll spend it on whatever they think they need. That might be shelter for tonight. That might be their next meal. It might be booze. That's not up to me. I'm just trying to give them something that they can use to try and help themselves in whatever way that's going to help them get through the next day. And so
Yeah.
I've always sort of felt like I don't need to dictate to them how they're going to spend their money. I'll let them figure that out for themselves because I don't know what their situation is. So I don't know. I thought that was, I guess I thought it was worth sharing of like, I don't care. Like
Yeah.
maybe they will buy booze with it. Whatever. That's their opinion. That's their money to do with what they want now. I'm just trying to give them a little, a little support.
Yeah, that's I think there was I've heard stories like that too, and like kind of that phrasing and stuff, and I've always kind of subscribed to the idea of like doing good recklessly, right? Like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
I like that.
Like you did that thing to do good, right? Like so like whatever that person chooses to do with it, that's for them to decide. But at the end of the day, you held the door for the person, you gave them some money, like you did something because it was just the good thing to do. And I think
Yeah.
that like that to me is like, for those folks that struggle with like, well, if they spend it on this and that, you can kind of go, well, you did a good deed regardless of how they handled that good deed.
Very good point. I love that. I want that to be a shirt now. Do good
Do good.
recklessly.
Yeah, do good recklessly. I love it.
Reckless do-gooders.
Oh,
That's fantastic.
reckless. That's us. That's us at this show. We like to go out and we like to cause a ruckus for good.
That's yeah, there was on the show Parks and Rec, the guy who like goes around pulling these elaborate pranks where he's doing something like building a playground in a low income neighborhood or built like
Yeah,
patching up a
yeah.
hospital that's falling apart, and he like thinks of
Uh-huh.
these big pranks, and it's just a guy going around doing like super nice things for
Just
people.
really great things. Yeah. I forgot about that little subplot. That was so fun.
Yeah, very, very good. Well, speaking of doing good recklessly, we're gonna do bad recklessly and play an ad. Do ad recklessly.
Ah. Nice.
Okay, we are back from that little reckless break. Let's there's a little bit more to talk about here in terms of trying to envision how this plays out as we think about how people handle this emotionally, psychologically, etc. And there's this concept of that you'll hear a lot from people. They'll call them handouts, which I think is just the worst.
Yeah. Yeah. So this calls out values of the user right away, right? So, like, it's a term that has been frequently used pejoratively in politics to deride the idea of offering, quote, unearned support to people. Wealthy people don't complain about handouts when they exploit tax loopholes, when they are given free money or free or cheap labor. When they inherit money, they inherit land, they inherit privileges. And people don't hate free given rewards or promotional items at events or by companies. I mean, like, how many times have we gone to a conference and people are like, ooh, goodies? And they like
Yeah.
stuff their bags full of pens that they'll never use, right? And so everyone loves handouts. And this idea of handouts being bad when solely used to help people who are in needy, but people that are totally okay with helping people who don't need it is completely backwards. It doesn't make any sense. Everybody loves free things. Everybody loves getting the thing that they didn't quote unquote earn. Except when we go to conferences and we get pens, we didn't need that thing. But when a person is on the street and they need food or they need a blanket to stay warm at night so they don't freeze to death or they need a pair of shoes so they can walk to the next place, suddenly that's a bad thing. So this term handout is a term that's used derogatorily and it's a misdirect, it's a scam, and it's a lie, and it's a manipulation tactic. It's just a bad way to describe any of this stuff because it's often used to keep people subjugated.
Yeah. So if you are complaining about something being a handout, shut up, you're wrong.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Let's talk. Let's also talk about. So there is a thing that I think a lot of people point to in sort of economists is the idea of an open or a closed economy. And we often think about this when we are trying to leverage some kind of outcome that we are trying to incentivize or encourage behavior to go in a particular direction by saying, let's make the things that this person is interested in and value available when they are doing things that are also in the best interest of their own safety and well-being, because
right.
sometimes they figure out how to get those things for free. Let me put this in a lot more specific and less vague terms. Basically, they know how to get stuff they like, and if we instead make that stuff restricted only for them doing appropriate things that are ultimately in their best interest, and a lot of times anyway, then they will make those choices. It's like people who will engage in those stick contracts where they'll put up money for a cause that they really, really hate if they don't meet some personal goal. And then if they don't meet that goal, that money goes to a cause that they really, really hate. And or instead they get the money back when they complete whatever objective they have, like a writer who's trying to write their book, and they get the money back if they meet certain writing deadlines, or they lose it if they don't. And so people will make that choice, and I think many people would make that choice, and many people do. But anyway, that's one piece of the pie. The other, though, is how people behave with respect to the idea of a token economy, which is really important because this is very different from a direct reward that is by itself a appetitive. It's a rewarding, it's a reinforcing effect, right? When
Right.
we eat ice cream, nobody pays us for eating ice cream and says, that tastes better now because I just paid you. Like, no, we were going to eat that because it tastes good. We just like it. Um,
Yeah, of course.
Money is a very flexible, very malleable token economy, but it is still a token economy. And token economies work different in how they move behavior, because in a token economy, you can bank your rewards. You can move them around to allocate rewards to better rewards in like a tiered system. Even animals do this. They figured out how to like, animals will manipulate a token economy just fine.
Right.
Um, but so this is pretty basic stuff, and we talked about this a little bit when we did an episode on money in general. But the idea here of the token economy is that like giving people just a reward, or like a basic thing that they need, let's say food, for example, means they no longer need to work to get that thing. Okay, that's fine. I actually don't necessarily even have a problem with that because I want people to survive and thrive and do well. But they're unlikely to do anything to get that if they're just getting it for free.
Right.
Tokens you can collect endlessly. So even when you've got some coming in, first of all, they by themselves are inherently worthless. You can't eat money. You
Right.
can't use it to keep yourself warm. You literally can't do anything functional with it. You can do a lot of things to back up with it. They're backed up by a lot of things, though. And so in token economies, people tend to prefer and work better in situations where they can bank large sums of it and then spend it as they wish, on things as they need them, as they want them, etc. And so I think people will hear like, well, if you're just giving them money, then you're just incentivizing them doing nothing. I'm like, the problem is they still aren't getting things that they need to survive. The things that they need to survive, they can get with money, and they can't get money because they can't get a job for whatever reason, or the job they have is not paying them enough money for them to get the things that they need. So when we simply supplement that token economy, then behavior is then more likely to invest that token economy to grow the bank. Like that is mostly where that's likely to go. Because again, tokens we can collect endlessly. Like, I give you one piece of chocolate, great, you're very happy. I give you two pieces of chocolate, great, you're very happy. I give you 15
It's
million
true.
pieces of chocolate. At some point along the line, you're like, I think I'm good on chocolate, bro. Like, you can hold off on the
That's
chocolate
enough.
now. Yeah, I don't really need 15 million pieces. Three was good, four was fine too. 15 million, way over the top. That is
Sure.
not true with token economies. I could give you $5. I could give you $15 million. You'd be like, keep it coming. We're good. Like,
Yeah.
I'm happy to all the throw it, just keep sending it my way, because there's this like, it doesn't have an expiration, it doesn't have a finite use. And I guess I would say that I think that the value does start to decrease as large enough sums of it roll in, right? Like, you get a large enough amount. If you're at $15 million, I give you another 100, you're like, cool, thanks. But if you've got nothing and I give you $100, fantastic. So there is the
Sure.
proportional relation there, but nevertheless, like, it is a nearly bottomless scale under on which we can continue to receive and work to receive that. And again, it only has value because we can trade it for stuff. So most likely what happens when people are accruing their tokens, their money, is that they invest it in something important, something that's going to last, something that's going to mean that they either don't have to spend as much down the road, or they can make more so they can support whatever they're doing in terms of their behaviors, which is paying rent and bills and medicine and food and that sort of thing.
Right. Right. Exactly. You nailed it.
As usual, I end with the just longest tirade of a rant of just talking while sounding like I don't breathe.
I think it could be worse. I always appreciate your tirades.
They happen just unbidden all the time.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's what this podcast is about. Why Abraham does what he does.
Sure, sure. Okay, so anyway, I think there could be more to unpack in that. I think there's a whole segment of talking about like how language affects rules and rules affect behavior and how we track contingencies and get into the nitty-gritty technical details of it all. But I think the big picture outcome is just this, is that as we sort of discussed in here, people who make a lot of money, a universal basic income, they'll barely notice. And to cover the cost of that, they'd already be paying more in taxes than they're getting back from the income in the first place. People who
Right.
don't make very much money, it is a huge lifeline. And whatever they're paying in taxes is so small that even though it does contribute to that, they're still getting a lot more back in return. So, in theory, it very well may have the exact intended effect, which is to support the people who need it the most. In practice, we don't know. We just don't know. It's very possible it would drive inflation through the roof. It's very possible it would collapse the economy. It's possible things would go awesome and everyone would be happy and there would be no more wars or fighting or homelessness or any or drug overdoses or anything. It'd be great. Who knows? We're
Yeah.
never going to
Who
know because no
knows?
one's going to do that experiment.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
what we have seen is that when this guaranteed cash assistance is offered to people who need it the most, they make the most of it and they benefit. And it helps everybody all around and ultimately saves money on the investment. So the overall effect is net positive pretty much every way that you slice it. You care about the well being of people? Good. This helps them. You care about the economy? Good. This helps it. You care about the moral right thing to do? Great. You're helping people who really need it. Like
Yeah.
there is you care about not spending government funding on all these social projects, great. This will actually save money because fewer of them will be needed. Like this is a win win
Right.
win 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 win. Everybody wins.
Yeah, I mean, by the look of it and by the data, it's promising, right? Like, and that's really what it comes down to. It's promising and it's demonstrated an effect on a small scale. So let's
Yeah,
consider
small
maybe
scale.
replicating that multiple times and seeing, and maybe that would be enough, right? Like, maybe we don't need large scale, huge universal basic income. Maybe we just need guaranteed income for folks that really need it. And let's watch the benefits come from that.
Yeah. It seems like at this point, it's probably worth the investment to continue the experiment on that level. I have no idea whether universal basic income would work, none whatsoever. Maybe it'd be great, maybe it'd be terrible. But it does seem like this small scale targeted approach will probably do the trick in terms of all the things that we hope that it would possibly do. I
Right.
actually found one quote that I meant to include before, but there was just it was just a summary thing where they were talking about a large review in the Journal of Social Policies in 2018 looked at 165 studies that did this, and in general, what they found was it improved everything. It improved education, improved work, it improved a sense of empowerment among the people who are in the group, it improved health and it improved nutrition. Like it was just goodness of all the good. And
Oh,
so
goodness.
like all goodness. And this again, this is just there's studies on this now. It's really clear. The effects seem to be pretty much there. But again, these are on the small scale applications that are very targeted. So we just don't know how it would
Right.
affect on a large scale.
Right. Exactly.
All right. Well, I got a second mini rant in there. So maybe I mean,
Good for
it was
you.
kind of like, it's kind of take on points, but um, I think what we can do is maybe, I mean, do you have anything else to add before we wrap this up?
No, I think that covers it. I mean, I think it's just one of those things where it's like ultimately it just seems like this does ultimate good. So let's maybe consider it.
Yeah. And again, it's like, if you care about the science, science is on the side of this.
Right.
If you care about policy, policy is on the side of this. The only people who are not on the side of this, as far as we can tell, are the people who are so married to their ideology that they can't see the truth and the data that are sitting in front of them.
Yeah.
Um,
And those people
so,
are buttholes.
and those people run this country,
Ugh,
um, or at
gross.
least large chunks of it, like Florida, um,
Yeah. Ugh.
and
Ugh.
Texas.
Ugh.
Mm, to name a few. Um, Anyway, we'll wrap this up here. I think we like to always share some recommendations. If you're joining us for the first time, stick around because we're going to have a fun part of this podcast where we say happy things. And if you have been with us for a long time, well, then you know what's coming. Stick around because we're happy to
Yeah.
have you and tell you some stuff that you could go check out or completely ignore, or maybe just hear and say, no, I know that that's a thing. Um, Otherwise, first, I would like to say, as I mentioned at the top of this, if you'd like to support us, you can do this, but do that, do this, do that, do whatever by heading over to our Patreon. When you do that, you get to hang out with a very cool group of people who help make this podcast happen. And you can even join us over there for free just to be part of the group, be part of the cool kids. That's cool. We're happy to have you. But we are going to do a special shout out for all those people who have really made the leap to help us out and commit financially, and to whom we are just eternally grateful. And that is Mike M, Megan, Mike T, Justin, Kim, Joshua, Brad, Stephanie, Olivia, Brian, Ashley, Kiara, and Michelle. Thank you all so much for continuing to support us. You are all the best.
Yeah, we love you so much.
All right. And other ways that you can support us, as I mentioned, you can pick up some merch, leave us a rating and review, subscribe. If you would like to tell us your thoughts about universal basic income or anything that we mentioned in here, or maybe if you received universal basic income, you can email us and tell us about that. We might even read that email on the air. You can email us directly at info@wwd.podcast.com. You can also reach out to us on the social media platforms, and there you will speak to our social media coordinator, Emma Wilson, which, speaking of Emma Wilson and our social media coordinator, I have this team of people who also help make this podcast happen, writing and fact checking from Shane and myself, and the audio wizardry that makes this sound like two people having a real conversation and not just Abraham ranting into a microphone like a lunatic is Justin, who just
Because I'm
does
not
the
real.
best. Yes, just to make sure
I'm
that Shane's
AI.
voice gets in there. Otherwise you hear too much of me.
We'll make it
Uh,
work.
No, I could not do this without Shane. We did this experiment. I had to close out a nostalgia episode recently without you, and it was just me just blathering on about nothing. Um, so very
We
much
need
needed.
each other.
Also, we need each other. Also, of course, thank you so much to our listeners, without whom we would just be talking to each other, which is fun. We still do it, but
Yeah, we still talk to each other. Yeah, it's great.
we're happy to have you here, listen to the things that we say that are intended not just for one another, but also for a broader audience. Anyway,
Yeah.
am I missing anything? Anything you'd like to add or that I forgot before we transition to some recommendations?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, let's recommend some things. Shane,
Oh.
I'm about blue in the face from all the speaking. You go first.
All right. I'm gonna recommend a book that I had. It was such a joy to read. I every time I
While
started it,
stuck at the
I
airport.
could not put it down. Yeah, while I was stuck at the airport. So I read probably like 400 pages of book while I was at the airport. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I was there for a long time. Um, so this book is called DIY: The Wonderfully Weird History and Science of Masturbation by Dr. Eric Sprinkle. And I gotta say, this was one of the best and funny. This is the kind of science dissemination I like, where it's like it's thoughtful. It's
Insemination or
there.
dissemination?
Yes. um it just it was nice. It's nice to like, and that's part of the reason like why when you recommended Paul Offit before, like I really enjoy his stuff because there's like a little bit, there's enough of a snark in it that you're like, this
Yeah,
guy's got a good sense of humor.
he's fun.
This takes it to a whole nother level, and it is absurd and a lot of fun and super fascinating when you kind of get into kind of like, and when you get to know a little bit about what this guy likes to write about, like where he's very like his whole goal is like sex positivity and like sexual liberation and stuff.
Okay, sure.
Super cool perspective and super great read. I mean, it's a short read, it's an easy read, and it is a lot of fun. And I think I mentioned it. I was telling Abraham on the beginning at the beginning of this. I have an autographed copy, and he signed it. Enjoy yourself, Dr. Eric Sprinkle. So if that tells you what you're getting into, so strong recommend. If you're into sexuality, if you're into just weird human history, if you're into any of that stuff, if you're into yourself, it's a great read.
I would say, based on your description, even if you're not into sexuality, probably worth checking out too.
Yeah, the Pope makes an appearance. It's great.
Awesome. DIY, The Wonderfully Weird History of Science and Masturbation by Dr. Eric Sprankle. Sounds
Uh-huh.
very, very entertaining and definitely going
So
on the
good.
list.
Yes.
All right, I'm recommending a TV show. I've only seen about 2 seasons of this TV show, but man, is it fun. So, this is a sitcom done in the mockumentary style called Abbott Elementary. As you might guess from the name, it essentially follows some elementary school teachers around their various excursions and humorous hijinks that take place in a fictionalized school setting that is largely focused on like an underprivileged school. But man, it's so funny and it's so sort of quick and sharp and witty and the writing is great, the acting is great. It's just a ton of fun, and it's one of those shows that you can really just plunk down and sit down and just chew through tons of episodes because they're only like 20 minutes. So the pacing is really quick and really good. If you like, oh, I just want to watch something funny for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or something, you can blast through a couple of episodes and feel pretty good about yourself afterwards. So
Yeah.
um yeah, it's just fun. So if you're into short, fun, little sitcom type mockumentary style TV shows, strong recommend for Abbott Elementary.
Oh, that's so great. Isn't who's in it? There's somebody I know in it, I think, right?
Yes, it has a really good cast. And I know that I've seen pretty much all of them or most of them in something else. So it's got Quinta Brunson as sort of the main lead.
Oh, she's
She was
great.
yeah, I forget what else she was in. She was what else has she been in? Should have just gone to IMDb.
She was on she was on Hot Ones
people.
not too long ago, I think.
Oh, okay. She was on Miracle Workers, a TV show I've recommended on here.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Also funny. Apparently that one's sort of out. She was in Weird, the Al Yankovic story. Um, big recommend on that. She was in. I never saw this, but it was called American Pickle, an American Pickle. Um, didn't get great ratings. She was on
I haven't seen
Big
that
Mouth,
either.
voiced a character on Big Mouth. So anyway,
Oh,
she's been in a
great.
lot of
Okay.
stuff. Yeah, really fun. I definitely remember her from Miracle Workers. Um, and then who's the other guy in here? Oh, there's so many big names. Tyler James Williams. He was. Oh, okay. Beep. So another one, the other sort of main lead-ish character, I guess, is Tyler James Williams. He's been on a ton of stuff. One that stands out to me that I definitely saw was he was on Walking Dead. He was on Key and Peele, Dear White People. So he's been on a man. His IMDb credits are long. He's been around and doing a lot of stuff. So guy's getting a lot of work. So anyway, yeah, it's really fun. I definitely think it's worth checking out.
Good stuff. Yeah. No, it looks like it's great. I have not had a chance to see it, but I want to sit down and watch it because I need a new show anyway. So
I think there's only 3 seasons at the time that we're recording this. It's on streaming on Hulu, but I think it's an ABC show. So if I'm sure they have ABC Plus or some subscription service that you can get it there, or if it just record it to your DVR or whatever. But
sure.
um, yeah, so yeah, okay, cool. All right, well, that's enough about our recommendations, which are always fun and we enjoy them. And I think that wraps up our conversation on universal basic income. Thank you all so much for joining us. I think that's all I have. Anything from you? Anything else?
Nope. That's it for me.
Uh, okay, this is Abraham.
And this is Shane.
We are out.
See ya.
Cool.
All right.
Part of the secret to
Ooh.
getting over hour-long episodes. Oh, sorry to keep you. I know it's almost 11 there. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm going to the gym in the morning, so
Even
I gotta pack up
worse.
my stuff. I know. Oh, yeah, I gotta pack up my gym clothes for the morning. So, um, I have a quick question for you. Who's running the program at UNR right now?
What do you mean who's running it?
Like, who's the main? like dean or director of the ABA program, behavioral analysis program
Uh,
there?
that is Ramona Homenfar.
Okay,
She's running the show right now. So Steve Hayes and Linda Hayes just retired.
that's exciting for
Matt,
them.
yeah, it was a big to do. Matt, oh, fuck, what's his name? All he does is delayed discounting. I should know his name. I met him. Matt's my
I know who
brother.
you're talking about.
Yeah. He's in delayed discounting program, or he does like all the quantitative stuff and has a bunch of grad students and teaches. He didn't get tenure, so he's moving on out.
Okay.
So there's kind of a lot of positions that they're maybe trying to fill right now. One of my best friends from grad school is actually on faculty there, Beth Contreras. Um,
Okay.
yeah, she and I were at FIT together, and she was my best friend while I was there. And so when I found out she was moving to Reno in 2020 to join UNR's faculty, I was just ecstatic. And so, and she ended up being Lauren's advisor because Lauren's advisor was retiring. And so Beth took over as the advisor and is like, I really am excited for us to not have this relationship so we can just be friends. um,
Right.
yeah, it was kind of weird, but it ended up working out really well. So, and then who else do we got right now? Because Pat Gezi has been retired for a while now. Mark Alavocius has been retired for a while now. Um, oh,
Yeah, I was just wondering because we are PBS is getting into Nevada now, and so they were like my CEO had asked if we had anybody like a connection over at UNR for like possible like setting up practicum students and stuff. So
okay. Um, would that bit all be in conflict with PBIS that's run through the university?
no, I don't think so. No, because PBS is a private in-home.
Oh,
Like
okay, gotcha.
we don't do the PBIS stuff.
Okay.
So we do like it's like yeah, I mean we follow the positive behavior support stuff, but like it's not the same. So I think you'll be fine. I don't think it'll be a problem at all.
You might be so that's where Lauren works is for PBIS. You might consider reaching out to Ashley Greenwald. She's been sort of the lead on all the PBIS projects for a long time. I don't know if there's anything to
Okay.
glean there, but she's I don't know exactly what her title is anymore. They all work in the Nevada Center for Excellence in Disabilities through the university, the NCED,
Yeah.
and so their director. This is actually really cool. When their last director retired, they actually hired someone who has disabilities to be the director, who
Oh, cool.
is yeah clearly someone who's had to really fight for things his whole life because he has trouble speaking very quickly and is in a wheelchair. And I think people sort of constantly probably sort of just took for granted that he was maybe delayed and is like,
Yeah.
I just speak slowly. I'm perfectly fine. He's has a
Right.
doctorate. Like, he's a very accomplished person and a super sweet guy. But I thought that was really cool. They were like specifically like, well, our direct, like if there are people out who are qualified, like have them be the
Right.
director of the Center for Excellence in Disability seems like the right call. So I thought that was great.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love that.
Yeah. So anyway, they're cool people over there, and then yeah, Ramona Homenfar would be probably the one to talk about with the ABA students.
Okay, cool. All right. That sounds good to me. I was just curious. Like I haven't done any research yet. I was just wondering if you had a connection. So that's perfect for me.
I'm on a project with Ramona right now, so she has always really liked Lauren and me for some reason.
Um, I've never like I got to email her for something. She was like, I think the maybe the editor of Jobum, and I had reached out to her to just be like, "Hey, I'd like to get involved in a journal." And she's like, "Can you have you done any of this?" I was like, "No." And she's like, "Okay, well, let's figure out like go get some experience to do that, and then we'll come back." And I was like, "That's fair."
I like Ramona. She's funny. She has a I don't know where her accent is from, but she has a sort of heavy accent. She really likes to say, "How cool is that?" When she's talking about
I
something
have
she's
heard her
excited
say
about.
that. I saw her speak at Calaba, and
Yeah.
she was talking about metacontigencies, and that's exactly what she said. I was like, "Oh, I like her. I like her." She's her stuff was super fascinating.
Yeah. She's gotten involved in a lot of projects. She went down, I don't know if she's still on this, but she went down a very in my personal opinion, counterproductive road on the IRAP. for a very long time, and
Okay.
I just think that that tool is hot garbage, and and so she anyway, I don't know if she's still pursuing that, but that was like a thing she was doing for a long time that had me kind of be like, oh, Ramona, what are you doing, man? Come on.
No, don't do that.
Um, that was actually the IRAP is the reason that I wanted to do the episode on implicit association tests a long time ago.
Yeah. Okay.
Are we still recording? We are. All right.
We are.
That was
Yeah, we
way too
are.
much inside information. Bye, bye, patrons.
That's okay. Bye, y'all. They get to see